Marisa Norcross.
And I'm Dave Freund, and this is The Next Page. Marisa, how are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm getting over a cold.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice how I said that in a positive way? I'm getting over a cold.
You're getting over it. You're on the upswing.
I have not really had a cold in a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But I have it now. Along with, it's from what you're telling me, along with probably
a lot of people
in central New York.
Mm-hmm.
Which is okay, because you know what? I'm getting over it.
Mm-hmm.
The worst is behind me.
Yep.
So I'm moving forward. So today, as I mentioned last week, today we're talking about courage. And people have probably noticed, like, I've been on this really weird thought process around leadership lately. And I had the post where I said I'm leadership sad, and I really, so I was looking for another book to listen to, and I stumbled on one called 3 Days in Moscow by Bret Baier. And as soon as I started listening to it, I knew I needed to buy the book, the hard copy. So, and I've already got it highlighted. I've got pieces of paper stuck in here. And as I went through that, I really got what I believe is a good portrait of what courage in a leader looks like. So that's the basis of what I wrote about today. And it was a long post. Probably one of the longest ones I've ever written, and I don't know how to shorten it because I have to say what I need to say type of thing.
Yeah.
But so the book, just to refresh people's memories, I may have mentioned it in one of our other podcasts, but so the book starts out with the idea of there's 3 days that President Ronald Reagan is in Moscow, and he's going to give a speech to the Moscow State University. And the way Bret Baier writes his 3-day series of books is he gives you an event, and then to set the tone for the event, he goes back to the key character's life from birth on. And so this really is a great book about the life of Reagan, President Reagan. And the interesting thing is that pre-presidency is a really small part of the book, but it's an important part of the book. And so as I was kind of going through this book, and I'm actually, parts of it I'm going through for a second time already, but these are the 4 things that jumped out at me that I think make up courage in a leader. The first one is you need to know who you are. The second one is you need to know why you do what you do. The third one is you need to lead with compassion, and the fourth is you stay the course. And I think that those 4 things allow a leader to really live out their courage. And so what do I mean by that? So I wrote some things here that what courage is not. Courage is not being bombastic and screaming at people. I'm not going to say why I thought of that. Courage is not spinning your image or the facts to get yourself in a position of authority. And I won't say what we're thinking about that. But it's much deeper than that. It really is, it's really understanding, again, like I said, knowing who you are. And one of the interesting things that I found in the book is that Ronald Reagan really began to understand what his calling was all about when he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild. So he's not a very good actor. He's a B-rate actor. So he's not gonna make a bunch of money being an actor. I mean, he's gonna get by. He's gonna have a nice life, but he's not gonna get rich doing that, so to speak. And he ends up being elected to the Screen Actors Guild. And there was, at the time, Senator McCarthy was in Washington, and he was holding these hearings, he was trying to investigate communism in the United States. And I forgot the exact name of the hearings that were going on, but it was some fancy name. And of course, Reagan gets called to testify. And while he's listening and investigating and hearing all the things about how the Soviets were infiltrating Hollywood, he's realizing the danger that's there. He's realizing that this could be something very serious, but he's not willing to give names. He's not going to sell out people. He said, because what he realized was that as soon as he did that, all of these people would be marked and labeled, and he didn't have facts. He said people need to be judged for themselves, and he's not going to be the person that's going to sell anybody out. So you already saw this amazing level of compassion and an understanding of a person's personal rights. So he comes back from Washington, and the next thing he knows is there's this young actress, her name's Nancy Davis, and she just happens to be in a pickle because another Nancy Davis is a communist sympathizer. And now she's going to be railroaded out of Hollywood because they have the same name. So someone says to him, would you be willing to at least look into this? So he does, and he says, you know what, listen, we need to help this young woman. It just isn't right that she's going to be railroaded out of Hollywood because of this. And so he puts his own reputation on the line to defend a person that, and I did find, I did find that the name of this. Now I lost it again. See there, I saw it a minute ago and I lost it. Anyways, so he's going to put his own reputation on the line to defend some young actress that he doesn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now if people picked up on the name, Nancy Davis was going to be Nancy Reagan at some point, but that was not at all why Ronald Reagan decided to take her case. That may have been one of the reasons why she wanted to meet him personally. I don't know, but it clearly was not. He had no idea what was going on at the time. So anyway, so you see that where he knows who he is and he knows what he values, and what he values is individual rights and he values liberty. So then my next point was know why you do what you do. And what was crazy was Reagan had to endure incredible blowback from the media. So I'm going to move forward, and so he stayed the course when people were lying. The media was lying about him. The media said he was a warmonger. The media said he was someone who was too simple. He wasn't smart enough to lead the country. They said he's an actor. What does an actor know about running the country? And all of these things he just kept going. He never allowed it to get himself rattled. And leading with compassion. So one of the things that Reagan did, and this all comes together, I promise you, even if I can't remember the name of that House or Senate committee. In one of his time when he needs to make some money because he's not that good of an actor, he was hired by General Electric to be their spokesperson for their Sunday night movie type thing. And what he did was he traveled to all over 8 years, traveled to all 139 General Electric plants. He met with over 250,000 GE employees.
Wow.
And he just listened to them. He wanted to hear their stories. He wanted to hear their dreams, their hopes, their fears. And these were things that caused something in him to not give up and stay the course, which was the fourth part. He had to stay the course. He couldn't back away. Even when everybody else was, again, maligning him. We think the media is bad now, and the media is bad now. I mean, it doesn't matter which media you go to. They all have a bias. They all have an agenda, and it always was. And again, they called him horrible things. They said that he was, again, a warmonger, and he was stupid, and he, what does he know? They talked about the fact that, he was nothing more than an actor that wore makeup every time he was out in public and dyed his hair. And the reality was he never dyed his hair, and he didn't wear makeup in public. That was just his normal skin tones. So why am I saying he stayed the course? Even his advisors told him to be careful of the rhetoric that he would use. Now, I challenge anybody listening, go do some searches, YouTube searches of Ronald Reagan speeches. You will never hear a bombastic person shouting. It's always quiet. It could be firm, but it was always with a bit of compassion. And so the best example was he's going to go to West Berlin. He's going to be visiting the city. He's going to give a speech. And all of his advisors and the German government said, do not mention the Berlin Wall. Don't mention the wall. Don't rile the Russians up. Don't rile the Soviets up. Just basically play nice. And he couldn't do that because he realized what was on the other side of the wall. And it's in the speech. On one side of the wall is prosperity and restaurants and art galleries and universities, and people are able to buy things and drive nice cars. And on the other side of the wall is barbed wire, guardhouses, and dog runs. And the city's bleak, and it's dirty, and people don't have the opportunity. And so, going against all of the advisors, he says those famous words, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And those of us that know history know that the wall did come down. And I actually last evening watched a YouTube video of a BBC interview with Gorbachev. And Gorbachev said, yeah, we decided that we would not interfere when the Germans started taking the wall down. German citizens started taking the wall down. But Reagan had to have the courage to speak up.
Right.
And so people said, this is horrible. This guy, all he wants is a nuclear war. When what his truth was that he believed that one of his key purposes of his presidency was to end the nuclear arms race. It was Reagan that got that had them starting to reduce the START treaty, where they started reducing the number of missiles. People felt that he was making these silly off-the-cuff comments when every one of the comments that he made was purposeful. He wanted people like Gorbachev to hear what he was saying. So what's the goal? Well, what we know happened was the wall came down, and Ronald Reagan did end the Cold War. Your generation doesn't. So how much do you remember of those days, like 88, 89, 1990?
Wasn't born yet.
There you go. Because I was thinking my son Mike was, but you're much younger than Mike. You weren't born yet.
No.
So imagine a city in Europe, in Germany, in a part of Germany where only part of the city is democratic, and it is locked inside a part of a totally closed society. That was Berlin. There was East and West Berlin in East Germany. There were Germans that couldn't live the way their German brethren could. They couldn't worship the way they wanted to. And Reagan just thought that was injustice, and he wasn't going to stand for it. So he takes the hard line. So we say, okay, so what good came out of it? The Cold War ended. He established a really great friendship with Gorbachev, and so part of it is, had Gorbachev not been the Soviet leader, at one point in the book, Reagan keeps saying, how can I establish a relationship with the Soviet leaders? They all keep dying. And they did. One after another died. We were all concerned that our president was old because he was 69 when he was elected. But within a short period of time, 3 Soviet general secretaries, I guess they call them, die.
Wow.
And then Gorbachev, the first one that's installed as a lead, and Reagan played hardball. And there were times when Gorbachev would say, Mr. President, this is what we need to do. And Reagan would just say, no, we're not going to do that. Because the goal was to work to eliminate nuclear weapons. So how did it end? Well, we know what it ended. The wall came down. The perestroika, which is what Gorbachev called his opening of the society in the Soviet Union, went forward. We do know that the Soviet Union collapsed And Reagan knew, and he said, I knew that it was not sustainable, a government like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's interesting things that happen in this. So the two men become really good friends. They actually get to the point where they're calling each other by their first name. And on the day before Reagan gives his speech at Moscow State University, he goes into Gorbachev's office in the morning, and they start talking. And Reagan pulls out a jean jacket, a denim jacket that he wanted to give to Gorbachev. And Gorbachev says, Ron, there's something even nicer that I have for you. And in his desk were letters that were sent by Russian people to President Reagan, but sent through the Kremlin. And these are what some of the letters said. Our baby daughter, weighing 3,100 grams, was born on May 28th, the eve of your first visit to our country. With the best of intentions, we wish to name her Regana, your surname, with the addition of the letter A. We want to tell you about this and request for your consent.
Wow.
Another one. We are happy about your arrival. We have just had a baby girl, and we ask your permission to name her Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Esteemed Mr. President, on the eve of your arrival in the Soviet Union, our son was born. As a sign of strengthening friendships between the peoples of the USSR and the USA, we have decided to name our son Ronald. We invite you to become godfather to our son. And these just continue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the man that the media maligned as a warmonger. And the Soviet people understood his heart because of the way he spoke. You know, and when he stood up in front of a giant statue of Lenin at the at the Moscow State University, he spoke of peace. He talked about human rights. He talked about everything that, you know, we hold dear in this country, and basically gave them this encouragement to pursue the same thing. And people saw a friend in Ronald Reagan, even though the media in our own country was labeling as a warmonger. I just found that fascinating. That was the courage to stay the course. And when you do, things work out well. There was, in his last speech, his farewell speech from the Oval Office in January, just before he left the White House, one of the things that I made note of is he talked about a new patriotism. And I love what he said here. This national feeling is good, but it won't count for much, and it won't last unless it's grounded in thoughtfulness and knowledge. And if we think of what's happening today, there's no thoughtfulness. People just attack each other. Maybe one of the best things that happened today was Instagram and Facebook are down.
I know.
So you can't trash anybody today on Instagram or Facebook. I don't know if Twitter's running, but Instagram and Facebook are the same organization. So it was such a refreshing book. And the interesting thing is, toward the end of it, you kind of wonder, so what did people think that were around him? And so they talk about after the ceremony, after he's getting ready, he and Barbara are getting ready to leave. And Fitzwater was his press secretary. Said Fitzwater recalled that standing on the steps watching the helicopter lift off, he, James Baker, and George Bush all cried. Baker and Fitzwater would be staying on, Baker as Secretary of State, and though they were excited about their new beginning, the full force of what they had lived with that man fell over them, and they couldn't stop the tears. So they realized the impact of what had happened, and they were also just so amazed at what this man was able to accomplish with compassion, you know, knowing who he was, knowing why he did what he did, leading with compassion and staying the course. He truly changed the world. Now, the somewhat sad piece is in this interview with Gorbachev, which I think was a year ago. The BBC, they asked him, they said, Mr. Gorbachev, is the Cold War over? And he paused and he said, it's getting a little chilly.
Mm.
Because we don't have the Reagans, or Ronald Reagan. So that's just my reminiscing and book report, whatever you want to call it. But I really believe that courage and leadership is lived out when you know who you are, you know why you do what you do, you lead with compassion, and you stay.
So my question for you, I guess,
Yes.
that the story you told, that's certainly, I guess, a tall order there to live up to. But if there's one thing to take away from these 4 points that you shared today, what would that be?
Which one of the 4?
Well, or just kind of one thing to walk away with or one thing that you could, do now to put yourself on this path.
Oh, that's a good one. So I think what you need to do to put yourself on the path is start and kind of work through the 4. You need to start by knowing who you are. And why do you do what you do type of thing will come next. And Reagan, was grew up in a poor home, put himself through school, just believed in the American dream. And it propelled him. He actually said that he was actually able to hear Roosevelt give a speech somewhere in Iowa, a re-election speech. And he said, I remembered how Roosevelt made us feel. He truly helped us believe that the only fear we had was fear itself. And he said, I wondered, could I ever do something could I ever be that kind of leader? And he really was. So I would think it's this process. You start with knowing who you are and then why you do what you do. And then remember, you always have to use compassion. And you need to stay the course. And if you stay the course without compassion, you lose the connection with the people. Because Reagan's compassion was evident. So even though the media were jerks like the media typically are, the American people liked him, loved him. Biggest landslide, I think, in history was the 1984 re-election of Reagan. I could be wrong. Somebody can fact check me on that. But I know it was 49 states.
Wow.
And the Soviet people loved him. Now, there's another testimony to courage, too, and that's Mikhail Gorbachev, because he continued with his reforms, and he was actually put under house arrest in, I think, August of 1991 while on vacation in the Crimea because he was making enemies within the Soviet Union. And the one disagreement that Gorbachev and Reagan had was over SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, that some people refer to as Star Wars, where Ronald Reagan believed that we could build a defense system that would shoot ICBMs out of space. So if you removed the risk of the rockets getting to you, then what's the point in having nuclear warheads on rockets? And Reagan believed that we could do it. And Gorbachev did not believe that it was defensive. He thought it was somehow an offensive weapon. So Reagan said, well, we'll share the information. That was their only real key point of contention that kept flaring up. But Reagan wouldn't back down. He said, no, we're not going to stop working on that. And it's interesting that recently the House of Representatives passed some spending to help keep the defense shield over the nation of Israel. That was questioned a couple weeks ago as to whether or not it would pass, and it did. So a version of it is actually working to protect Israel from missiles.
Wow.
So that's a long about way of answering your question. But it took 2 men who knew where they were, why they did what they did, both leading with compassion, both wanting to stay the course, and both of them feeling that they had to somehow eliminate nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And that they did not do. And it still bothers Gorbachev, at least as of last year, as a 90-year-old being interviewed by the BBC. So now you want to know what I'm going to talk about next week. I have no idea. And I don't think I'll be reading another book between now and then. So, but it might be something that springboards off of this. I'm not sure.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
So it's not sunny and blue skies today. It's kind of gray.
Yeah. It's not the most beautiful day, but that's okay. It helps us appreciate the good ones.
Exactly. Anything exciting coming up?
No, not really. Just, a lot of fall things I have on my list.
Okay.
How
Well,
about you?
I'm hoping that within the next week I can take my final boat ride of the year. That would be wonderful.
Oh, wow.
Who knows? We'll see.
Okay.
So with that, I'm Dave Freund.
I'm Marissa Norcross.
This was The Next Page.